Okay, good morning, everybody. Welcome to the 2020 Commodity Classic. Wow, here we go. We want to welcome you here to learn from the masters. We've got a couple special individuals up here, Randy Dowdy and David Hula, and we've got 1 hour and 15 minutes. Does anybody think we can get through it all in 1 hour and 15 minutes? I don't think so either. So we're going to modoc through this pretty quick. We've got a lot of questions for them, and we're going to allow you to ask some questions here after a while too. So I guess before we get started, being 2020 here, a lot of things have happened in the last 20 years. And I think a lot of you that's been in the industry for a long time, we've seen a major transition. I guess first of all, you're going to see this picture of corn quite a bit in the next hour and 15 minutes. Anybody got any guesses on how many bushel corn this is that you're staring at? Somebody said 600? No, not 600. But this guy knows about 600. This is about 300, 320, right in there. So, David, I guess, if you doubled this, that'd be what 600 bushel corn looked like, right? So I guess as we look at the last 20 years, a lot of changes come about. You realize genetic yield back in, when we look at the national average on corn, was about 136.9. 2019, we hit a 168. According to the USDA, that's still being a little bit disputed, but that's the number they put up. Quite a bit of yield gain in the last 20 years. As we look at trade adoption, probably some of you young bucks in here don't realize that before 2000, didn't know really what Roundup Ready was. It got started there in the mid 1990s, and about 25% of the corn market in 2000 was actually traded. And of course, now we're staring at over 90%. Of course, as we look at seed treatments, in the last 20 years, Poncho, Votivo, Cruiser, Avicta, we're talking about higher rates, better fungicides, a lot of nutrients on that seed in the furrow. We're talking about PGRs now. Really weren't talking about this stuff 20 years ago, so some major advancements there. Think about agronomics. How many of you folks in the room have put a lot of money into tiling the last 20 years? Seen your yields go from 100 to 200 overnight. Wow, what a major advancement that tile has brought us. Fungicides, really post-fungicides is relatively new. And you think about precision and digital ag, that's just kind of taken the whole industry by storm. Who knows where it's going to be in another 5 or 10 years. As we continue on, we're here to learn from the masters and talk NCGA this week. And 2000, that big yield was 357. 2010, that big yield was 368. I think, David, that was your yield at 368. Then 2019, we're sitting here at 616.19 bushel. I'm missing a couple digits there, but you get the point. 600 bushel, pretty phenomenal. So what's the future hold? As we look at the future, we really believe it's going to be about systems performance. Feel like it's already there. And, it's more than just genetics. It's more than just traits. It's more than just tiling. It's more than just, fertility. It's putting the whole system approach together. Feel like niche markets are really going to continue to take over here or be pretty substantial as we look into the future. And, of course, risk management. You folks want consistency. And I think the things that we learned from these two fellows is certainly all about consistency. So this is a major opportunity for AgriGold to sponsor this event. And certainly want to give a little commercial here. We're relatively new in the NCGA arena. Kind of got started there in about 2013 and really came in to this arena with 3 wins that year. This year we ended up with 56 wins. So our exposure continues to increase. I know we've got a lot of customers in the room, a lot of salespeople, a lot of agronomy folks. We want to thank you for all you do for us on that front. Thanks for making that happen. So, these are the kind of numbers we're touting. This year we got 6 national winners. We're winning across 50 state winners, and we've got 17 states represented. And the neat thing about it is, Couple things is 36% win rate, and as we look across the board, that is one of the highest in the industry, if not the highest in the industry. So we're pretty happy about that. So you think about the hybrids, our customers are doing it with more than one hybrid, and as you look across the board, we've got 15 hybrids that are winning for AgriGold out there. And really, I think the take-home message from this, there's a lot of good genetics out there, a lot of good germplasm. And, what we're here to do today is try to figure out how do we take that germplasm, no matter what we're planting, to the next level. And that's what we've got these two gentlemen here to do today. So, without further ado, just want to make some introductions. Of course, my name is Mike Kavanaugh, and I'm the agronomy manager for AgriGold. And we've got a couple guys here, Randy Dowdy. Randy is from Valdosta, Georgia, on my far left here. And of course, Randy's known for the guy that broke 500 bushel. Okay, broke 500 bushel, and his first yield there was 503. Of course, Randy makes it loud and clear as he did hit 553 too. So not just 503. We want to make sure that everybody knows that. Of course, another thing Randy's known for is he hit 190 bushel soybeans this year. So pretty phenomenal yield. And then we've got David Hula. David comes to us from Charles City, Virginia, and first to break 600 bushel. Pretty phenomenal. World record corn yield of 616.1953. Folks, 600 bushel. I think this deserves a round of applause. Okay, so, we've been working with these guys, touch and go here for about 5 years, and just fantastic to learn a lot of different things. And wanted to throw some things up here that we have learned. If you've listened to Randy Dowdy talk, he always talks about being a student of the crop. Be willing to change, think outside the box, uncover the limiting factors. And, we've all heard that, yield potential in the bag is 500-600 bushel. We certainly, truly have seen that now. Now, as we think about a lot of the stuff that we talk about at these meetings, Randy is really, both of these guys, Randy and David, like to talk about the importance of flag testing and how critical even emergence is in that 12, 24-hour period of one or the other. Paying attention to all fertility needs, making sense of tissue sampling on a timely schedule, all this stuff. And I do want to tell you, we have made some positive change just at AgriGold. And, 5 years ago when we met Randy Dowdy, he said, folks, you got to be tissue sampling. You got to understand it. And 5-6 years ago, if you were going to ask me at certain yield levels, at different growing degree units across the plant's life, what are the different nutrient requirements? Couldn't have told you. Studying from these two guys, they've helped us start to learn and put a process in place. We've got a data set now of 5 years old that we're starting in our 5th year now, 2,300 data points that documents nutrient levels by yield environment by growth stage. Pretty phenomenal. And our agronomist here, John Breen, sitting here in the front, he's going to talk about it at our booth today between 2 and 2:30, 2171, if you want to hear a little bit more about that. So let's get started. So goals for today is certainly take a deeper dive into maintaining yield. Hopefully we can inspire a little bit of change in the next hour and 15 minutes. And from now to about 10:30, we've got a list of questions that we're going to ask these guys to answer. And then from 10:30 to 11, we've got a couple microphones that we'll scatter around the audience and let you ask some questions as well. So let's go ahead and get started. So who thought 2019 was a challenging year? Anybody? It was tough. It was tough, especially that eastern, central, even northern corn belt. It was just tough all over. So, David, this is really a question from you. From 2017, you hit your 542, and now you're 616. I mean, we're talking almost 74 bushel in a very challenging environment in this room. So the question is, what were the contributing factors to make this happen?
Well, First of all, thanks for AgriGold having me here today, and all y'all wanting to participate. And I'm grateful that y'all survived 2019, because I know it was a struggle for most of y'all. Now, fortunately, it wasn't for me. We were blessed with good weather and then some management, and then we were also blessed with something that we'll talk about later. It's going to be a recurring theme after seeing some of these questions that Mr. Mike was going to ask, is some of the things that the weather provided us. I never want to blame the weather, but I want to understand what's happening, and then I can know how to manage the crop. And then also, if the crop just becomes corn, as opposed to trying to push it to the next level to where we're trying to get to new yields. But the difference between 2017 and 2019, we implemented a couple management changes. We started playing with a piece of machinery called a soil warrior. Now, I am a never-till guy, and that we started no-tilling since '86, and
no, you were a never-till guy.
Yeah, I was a never-till guy. So now we're experimenting with, this will be the third year of using the soil warrior, and we're playing with some products mixed in with that strip till component, and then getting that land in better shape for that planting process. So 2019, we had heat, we had adequate moisture, and when folks say, when do you think you had a good opportunity, was when I saw that corn emerge. And that was a big difference. I thought 2017 we had a great emergence, but 2019, if y'all are familiar with the flagging test, not going to spend time on that, but out of our populations, I only had 2 color flags, and it was very few of the second color. And then to finish the crop off, we just had abundant sunshine. We were relatively dry later in the season, cooler, not cold nights, but cooler nights, and then just ample sunshine. And I just checked all the boxes. And I cover some of those questions later on as you got going on, Mr. Mike.
All right, thanks, David. So Randy, get you started here. Same thing. Randy recorded 2 soybean yields last year, 2 different varieties, one at 179 and the other one at 190. Pretty phenomenal. Did it twice. Same question for you. How did you make this happen in a challenging environment?
Well, we had a 15-inch planter that gave us a fit 2 years ago, and we switched that planter to planting some high residue to a 20-inch row spacing. And we planted those beans, and we planted probably 3 weeks, it was actually April 20th was the 170.1 in 2016. And this year we planted those beans almost a full month earlier. And we were just playing, and we wanted the longest indeterminate bean we could find that, we could get flowering during the longest days of the year. And so we planted a 4.7 or a 4.9, I'm pretty sure that was the numbers. And we planted those beans 3rd week in March, and emergence was there, simultaneous emergence. Nathan, my employee that works for me, did a good job. He knows I'm OCD and anal retentive about the planter, and 100% he was on top of it, and he did us well. He served us well. I was on a corn planter, and he was on a bean planter about the same time. But I guess the biggest thing, we did do some 2x2 on the beans. We played around with that. We think that's driving some yield too, especially late season. We're able to put it in the root zone, and that's a big deal, putting that fertilizer in the root zone for later placement or early placement for later use. And, the intangible that we can't buy in a jug is sunlight. And we had sunlight that was copious. I mean, we had 400 acres we didn't harvest a bushel on. Not one. Not 1 bushel of corn or 1 bushel of beans. So if it's not raining, there's probably not what? A lot of clouds. And for all that it hurt us on our dryland yields, it was phenomenal where we had water. We had a lot of sunshine. And where we had irrigation, it was king. And that's the part I wish I could buy in a jug. For all the vendors that may be in the room, figure that out. You will get rich quick, right? So we have to.
But let me beta test it.
Just let me mix David's. I'll take care of it for him. But I can assure you that intangible that we can't control, of sunlight was a big deal in the driving of retaining flowers and then helping us in grain fill on corn. On those beans, I mean, we had 21 to 25 fruiting nodes, 6 to 10 pods per node, so it varied. I did not see one bean that had less than 3 beans in a pod. I saw no 2 bean pods, none. And those beans typically, I think the parent seed that we planted runs around 2,600 seed per pound, and the beans that we tested at harvest were running 1,900 to 2,000 seed per pound. So big beans beget big yields, right? And so part of that we feel like was driven by the sunlight and the management.
Randy, any comments on the populations you're running on soybeans?
Final stand on that was 125,000. I think one thing that you guys are doing that I fell into the trap of, and I'm afraid that a lot of people are still doing, is that, I need more plants. Well, you may need more plants to get them all up because you may have tough conditions, but a bean's pretty tough. And if anything's going to go through stress and be able to handle that stress, I would say it's a bean. And I don't think that you need, more than 100,000 for a 100 bushel yield goal. I think you're overplanting them, especially if you're having problems with white mold and lodging. If those two things are your issues, you plant them too thick. Back off.
Okay, thanks, guys.
I know the seed companies probably don't want to hear that, but it is what it is.
I think you're right on target. So, a lot of us heard Randy and David talk over the last several years, and they continue to talk about 10 bushel per thousand. What does that mean? They're trying to get, for every 1,000 that they're planting, they're trying to get 10 bushel and feed that crop. So, that means that David Hula's probably planting well over 50,000. And, as we try to do that, I guess out here in the real world, Dave, it seems like all we can do when we plant that thick is end up with about 26 to 30 long. How are you maintaining that ear length season long and getting it done?
Well, let's first realize that I'm in a risk management mode. I don't have my entire irrigated field planted at a high population. So, because I never know what kind of sunlight we're going to get. And, you've already heard it. We both talked about it at least once already. And being in the risk management mode, we're going to plant different populations in their pivots and in our dryland corn. And then we do some other things like hybrids or whatnot. But looking at that 10 bushels per thousand, and when we get to the higher populations, the key is getting the crop up uniformly. If you don't get the crop up within a relatively similar GDU from the first emerger to the last emerger, then your management scheme or your yields need to be adjusted. And when you can get those to come up uniformly, that's when you have an opportunity. And we use things like fertility, fungicides, plant health to assure we can protect all the integrities of that genetic potential throughout the growing season. And we know there are just certain times in which you can influence yield. And I don't want y'all to think that this past year, walking in there in my fields, because I've heard Randy say the best thing you see in your field is your shadow, and I've used that. Thank you for that without copywriting it or anything like that, Dowdy. So, but going out there and I'm looking at my crop, I checked the first box. That corn came up in 6 days from planting. That doesn't happen in April for Virginia. Usually it takes a little bit longer. But then after the crop got up to 600 GDUs, we just started seeing a bunch of tillering. So now I knew, all right, things are on target. Now I know we're not big fans of tillers, but I know the plant is well balanced and it's producing. Then, we lost one of the tillers later in the season, but when we started pollinating, we weren't just having one big ear, y'all. It is not one huge ear. We just captured 2 ears and were able to keep the second ear, with the second ear having 300 to 600 kernels on it. And that was a certain percentage of it. It wasn't every plant. That was close to 40% of the plants. So we know that, my goal is 10 bushels per thousand. We had a harvest population a little less than 52,000. So we exceeded that 10 bushels per thousand. And that was because of the additional sunlight we had, and we were able to retain that second ear. Outside of, this is in the production part. This isn't in the border rows. So I know everybody likes to take a picture of the edge of the field and say, oh, look at all this. Well, duplicate that all the way in, and that's the benefit of that sunlight that we capture. You told me to keep it short.
Randy, you got any comments?
Well, did anybody hear about the planter variability challenge that we talked about? Anybody heard about that? I know some next level guys are in the room. I know they know. I know Brian and Darren Hefty talked about it on their show. Have you guys ever done a flag test all the way across the field, across the width of the planter, and different soil tests? If you really want to get you an aha moment, and we feel like there's 9 things it takes to get all plants up at the same time. We teach that religiously to our growers that we're working with. And we feel like there's 9 things it takes to get them all up. And one cool part that you have to do is you have to get all the plants to come up at the same time to have a Chinaman's chance to make this 10 bushels per thousand, okay? That has to happen. If you are planting today 35,000 plants and you're not making 350 bushel corn with a non-fixed ear hybrid, you're planting it too thick, okay? Now get them up at the same time and watch what happens. You get bushels for free. But one thing we talked about, and Brian and Darren talked about it on their TV show, and they've actually put it out on the radio show as well, is the planter variability challenge. And I came up with this because me and David walked fields all summer. We walked fields with growers all over the United States, and I told David, I said, these guys don't get it. They don't understand. David come up with the idea of let's mark off 10 plants in a row and how many ears are on the same node. Let's see what that looks like and see how many of them come up at the same time. Because in theory, if they come up at the same time, you could pull a string from this side of the room to this side of the room, and every ear will be on the same node. They'll be level, right? If they come up at the same time. And most people assess a stand by saying, I planted 35,000 and 33 of them come up. And you feel like, well, I don't have to replant. The question is, did they come up at the same time? That's the most important variable. And if they didn't, your chances of 10 bushels per thousand goes down really fast. But David come up with the idea that if all the ears are on the same node, we count 10 plants in a row. If we got 6 out of 10 on this row, and we got 8 out of 10 on this row, for some reason this row unit performed better than this row unit, right? And with all our growers, we'd go in the fields, we'd have them ask, okay, what are you seeing? And we'd hear guys say, well, I got a 4 out of 10, I got a 6 out of 10, I got an 8 out of 10, I got a 9 out of 10. And when we see that, I talked to David, I said, they don't get what that's costing them. Who in here's bought a combine lately? Raise your hand. You remember what you paid for that, John? You didn't forget that day, right? Either you stroked the check for it or wrote your name on that signature line for a payment, right? One of the two. You don't forget that. Anybody bought a tractor lately? You remember what you paid for that check, when you wrote that check, right? Too much, right? I feel your pain, right? See, David gets all his stuff for free. He don't have to pay for anything.
Here we go.
That's what I always hear on this ag talk. Well, if I got everything for free, I could make 616 too, right?
I'll gladly give them my bills if it's free.
So I come up with the planter variability challenge, and if you guys want an aha moment, walk in your field this year at harvest. If you got a 24-row planter, know where the full width of the planter is, and take 1/1000th of an acre. Take you 24 buckets if you got a 24-row planter. Take you 24 buckets, mark off 17.5 feet on 30-inch rows, and harvest every year. Put them in a bucket, tote them out. Get your grandkids, get somebody to do this with, get your grandkids, and get the old-timey hand shellers, whatever it takes, spend some time with them, and shell this corn, and weigh the grain by the row. Weigh the grain by the row. Because every farmer in this room has fell into the trap of saying the weather costs them yield. You make good yields, they say, the weather. They make bad yields, well, we had a bad weather. We had guys after this, and when I come up with this, I said, I want you to go do this on your farm. And they did this before harvest, and we've got guys averaging 220 bushel corn across the width of the planter and the field average. But when they did this planter variability test, they found some rows that were making 180, and they also found some rows that made 308. Even in a crappy weather year. Is that the weather's fault? Is that the weather's fault? I can't hear you. So how can they make 290, 280, 270, and 308 in the field if it's all the weather's fault, right? Or if you just had bad weather? Something else is wrong. So I challenge you guys to do that. And the sooner they start getting them all up at the same time, that 10 bushels per thousand starts to happen. Okay?
Thank you, Randy. Okay, let's turn the page just a little bit. So I think everybody realizes, there's a lot of different germplasm out there in the countryside. A lot of different genetic backgrounds. All different genetic backgrounds equals different kernel makeup, different test weights. We have these guys come talk to us, different meetings throughout the season, periodically. And one thing that they like to do, they like to go out in their fields when it's late summer, and they like to bring ears to the meetings. David, a couple years ago, you were at French Lick, Indiana. You brought Randy a little present just to show him what your ears looked like. Well, we passed those around the audience, and, you grab that ear, and it feels like a brick. So, as I think about some of the products that we're using, how are you getting 65-pound test weight out of these hybrids?
Well, first of all, it starts out with a hybrid. You got to have a hybrid that, has some heavier test weight corn than normal. Then also, when I'm kind of looking at some hybrids, I also like to pick a hybrid that flowers earlier than its relative maturity, so it kind of lengthens your grain fill opportunities. But this past year, we did a trial with BASF, their new product called Veltima. And the key for our success on having heavier corn is just like in the event of not having a frost and you go out in your fields and let's say you get some weeds escape, typically don't the weeds mature and then the foliage is still green historically? Unless you get a frost. So I've kind of tried to take that same philosophy and let's turn it into our production of our corn. And I want my corn to still be green about the time the harvester's out there. And if we can maintain that plant health benefit, then we're allowing as much energy, starches, sugars, whatever, get into those kernels, the nutrition, and just make those kernels denser. And, I think back in, I guess it was like 2013, I had a goal of trying to keep some corn from denting. And we were pretty successful at that. My daughter and I hand-shelled some corn and checked it out. 26% of the kernels were completely rounded. 51% of them were rounded to flat, and then the rest of it had a little dent. So then we were picking like almost 66-pound corn. And it was the biggest contributor to that is fertility balance, but then allowing that crop just to continue to express itself and stay green. And I mean, we're shelling corn, and I had some pictures that, I don't have here, but I got corn that was completely green at 26, 27%, and then we let some of the corn sit out in the field till it actually field dried. And still the ear leaf was still green. Not black green like in July, but had a lot of green matter still in it, and everything above was green. So that's just allowing that crop to put all that energy, because when you plant a kernel of corn, what's the goal of that kernel of corn? To make one kernel. What is your goal? To get it to make 5, 6, 7, 800 kernels or more. So just keeping that plant healthy that's been our biggest contributing factor to test weight.
Randy, anything to add?
100%. Look at that picture. You see a brown shuck. What was the moisture on that corn that you took a picture of?
About 25%.
Y'all like to call that the AgriGold look.
That's right.
Green plants, mature corn. Unless you've had a frost, that's what your crop should look like. I mean, that's what your crop should look like. My combine kills the corn when it goes through the field. Period. And to do that, it can't run out of nutrients, can't run out of water. There's no reason corn should be dead unless a frost kills it when you get ready to harvest it. Shouldn't happen, in my opinion. So,
And if you deal with a lot of residue, you harvest that green, watch your residue go away in a hurry.
Yep.
Because it's still got moisture, and that biological life in the soil is going to start, microbes are going to start eating it up.
and if you have challenges with corn standing, what's going to stand better, a dead plant or one that's alive? So,
Thanks, guys. Speaking of microbiology, so, something that we hear a lot of folks talking about right now, the importance of soil microorganisms, things that we're putting in the ground and we're disturbing microorganisms. I guess, Randy, I'd start with you. What do you do to improve microbial growth and activity in the soil?
well, for one, I like to have something for that microbiome in the soil and the plants, especially when it comes to the soil. When you're looking at the microbiome, you want it to be stimulated. Well, the good thing about the Southeast is what? Y'all like to come there because it's warm, right? And I think we've had like a half a dozen days this year, our soil temps have dropped below 50. So we've got microbial activity all the time. But I like to have a living root mass there. I like to have cover crops there. Something needs to be in that root zone for those microbials to colonize around. And then when I kill it, and I place a seed where it's at, mine start working faster. So everybody that's a cover cropper, raise your hand. You already know. The rest of you need to learn that part of it. Now, I understand you're in Wisconsin or North Dakota or wherever, Michigan. It's hard for you to get cover crops planted. But having a living root mass for us is a big deal. And there's a natural colonization there. We're not adding a lot of biology. We just believe in stimulating the biology we got. Okay? That's part of what we're doing. David?
Yeah, I agree. Now, I'm in the seed business, so some fields we just don't have cover crops because, a rye plant, one rye plant go to seed in a wheat field, and I sell wheat to a customer, and he gets one rye plant in his 100-acre field. You think he's going to remember that? Pretty much. So I'm going to lose a sale, or my brothers or somebody will. So wherever we have corn and bean in their rotation, we do cover crops. And I agree with Randy. Now, I get a little bit colder than he does, but their ground doesn't freeze very often. So we're keeping that biology alive there. And then in the non-cover crop areas, and for the folks in the Midwest where it gets cold and you don't have cover crops, I would challenge you to try your biology's not dead. It's just slowed down, and it's probably been suppressed a great deal.
Or deeper.
Yeah, or deeper. So try to feed it. Whether it's, you get sugars, you get humic acids, just try to give it some kind of food. And then, there's some fertilities that help enhance that as well. So look at priming your dirt to get it excited. And that way you can kind of speed that process up. Particularly if you got organic matter that I assume most of y'all have, and then you got residue. That's a really good way to try to get some of that residue disappear.
So I'm sure everybody in the room's thinking, okay, what does he mean prime the dirt with sugar? So does that mean go out and spray some sweet tea out there? Or does that mean go out and put 10 pounds of sugar on?
No, I'm thinking like Mountain Dew.
Oh, okay. All right. That's what I thought.
Yeah, did y'all see that one? I don't know if y'all watched the Corn Warrior show, but one year I just had an idea. I said, hey, I want some certain products out there, and I went from their home farm all the way to their western farm where the Gene, the helicopter pilot, was going to meet me, and I stopped at every convenience store and bought every 2-liter bottle of Mountain Dew they had. And y'all, I sprayed Mountain Dew on that corn, and my crop duster was kind of worried when he took off if it was going to shake up and explode his tank or something. But we overcame that concern, and we picked up a few bushels, but it was just something about feeding that crop. And so
What he's not telling you is he hadn't had to buy Mountain Dew since.
Yeah, I was hoping for a Pepsi sponsorship.
There you go.
Yeah, if everything's free,
That's right.
It's a big
Might as
deal.
well get some free Mountain Dew at the house, too, right?
So, now, sugar, just regular sugar, molasses, any of those products And, you know, there's some fertility additives that you'd want to do, but, you know, we started using sugars years ago to help mitigate burn on wheat when we're spraying nitrogen, and, you know, kind of just evolved to where we were seeing big dividends on their root masses from that. And I know some of y'all think it's just fairy dust or, it doesn't make anything. Some things are hard to see a yield benefit over time, but when you can see where you can mitigate some stresses, and that's what some of these products have a ability to do, is allow that plant to overcome a stress event, and you're just feeding the soil there, because there's an abundant amount of stuff below ground. Because y'all as AgriGold know your stuff above ground. I'm sure they could describe every characteristic of all their corns, you know, disease, resistance, test weight. But below ground, you know, that's just an unknown environment, and we're starting to study. Well, I don't want to say unknown, but we're studying a lot more and more as time goes on.
Okay, thank you. Next question. You know, we think about every yield level has a barrier. I'm sure there's probably folks in here thinking, you know, if I could just get to 200, I'd be happy. Some of you think if I could get to 300, that's my goal. If I could get to 400. You know, when you think about what key nutrients or management strategies got you to 3, 4, 5, even 600. And I know we could talk about this for 8 hours today, but just, you know, big picture.
All right. Are you addressing that to me first?
Sure.
First of all, I have some ground that if I could get 150 bushel corn, I'm excited. So it's not all rosy ground. I mean, my CECs go from 1.5 to 6.7. So we're dealing with some sand. Now, when you start talking about fertility, you got to feed the crop. So if you have a yield, let's say you've been farming in an environment that you've been content with 225 bushel corn, and then all of a sudden you want to change your yield goal to 275, and you hear your AgriGold salesman say, hey, we got this new hybrid, it's got great yield potential, and you say, all right, well, I'm going to change that, and I may add a little bit more nitrogen because it's going to take a little bit more. But y'all, do you not realize it takes nitrogen, it takes phosphorus, it takes potash, it takes sulfur, it takes boron, it takes zinc, manganese, copper, iron, moly. So just by adding 2 changes, hybrid and a little bit more fertilizer, as in nitrogen, I wouldn't think you're going to achieve the goal that you're coveting. So you got to realize how much does a whole crop actually require. And, you know, over years, I'm in the Chesapeake Bay watershed. We have to follow a nutrient management plan, because if y'all are not cognizant of what's happening in the Chesapeake Bay, you need to pay attention, because at some point in time, it's going to be the model for a lot of watersheds. And, you know, we implement these nutrient management plans, and as we see yield, the opportunity for more yield, we'll make more fertility applications. That starts out with the seed planting process. We know once I get my stand up, I know what my yield goal is. Now going from 250 to 300 or 400, we're adding more nutrients. We got a better stand. Now if I don't get the stand, no need to pour good money on bad, right? Because I'm in the ROI mode as well. Every farm is a business, so we have to be profitable. And the nutritional component of it is it's not one nutrient, it's combinations. And that's where, you know, I applaud AgriGold for all these tissue samples they've been doing. You know, we've been doing it for decades, and we have a roadmap. So that's kind of one of our hidden secrets, that we know what ratios should be for certain yield levels. Unlike some of the universities, unlike some of the seed labs, some of the agribusiness folks, you know, we have tangible evidence to say, and this is where it's supposed to be. So if you are pushing your yields, it's a whole system, y'all. It's not just 1 or 2 components. You got to push that whole system up to achieve that level.
Randy, anything to add?
Well, we have to understand the law of the minimum. I mean, go back to Liebig and Springle back in 1800. Yield is proportional to the, you know, the least or the most limiting nutrient, whichever nutrient it may be. So if we remember that, it don't really matter how much nitrogen or phosphorus we got if boron's a limiting factor, right? And there's been plenty of work done by the universities and labs for a long time, and everybody's heard me say this. There's plenty of information on nitrogen, phosphorus, and potash, right? We know how to make 200 bushel corn. If there's university people in the room, I challenge you to tell us how much of each nutrient does it take to make a bushel corn. And then next, what are the levels we must maintain in that plant at any point in that plant's life for the yield goals we cut? Every time I go, I ask those questions of the universities, and I ask them of the experts, and I ask them of the labs, the people we're paying to give us the information, and there's crickets for an answer. There's crickets for answers. So that's one cool thing that we've been doing, and we have figured out, is that there are numbers you need to maintain, and there are tissue sample values you need to maintain throughout the season, and there is a direct response. There is a nutrient component to yield, and that is one of the controllables that we can control. And David said it best, and I don't want to take anything away from what he said. It is a complete nutrient system. Anybody use manure? Why do you keep using it? Because you got it, trying to get rid of it, it's free. Some of y'all make higher yields with it.
It's not free.
Yeah, it's not free. Maybe it's free to you, right? But especially if you got your own houses. But the people that buy it or the people that use it have figured out what? Maybe it's a cheaper source, or they're making higher yields. Now, what's in that manure that's not in their commercial fertilizer? Micronutrients. What else? Organic matter? Microbials? So now add all that to your commercial fertilizer system and watch what happens. The FBI would call that a clue. Okay? They would call that a clue. So there is no silver bullet. I wish it was. I wish there was just one little thing I could tell you to do besides have the Midas touch. All right.
What do you call him? King David?
King David.
There you go.
Y'all make sure y'all have the utmost respect. We have royalty.
Don't listen to him, please.
When I was a stalker of David back in 2011 and 12, trying to learn how to, I don't know what's doing that, but I'm not doing it. But in 2011 and 12, I read a lot of articles that were online. Just Google David Hula one day, okay? And go down and read all the articles. And one of the writers said, David Hula, commonly known as King David.
It doesn't work at home, y'all.
I have met Miss Sandy and spent some time with Miss Sandy. I don't know if she's here, but she keeps David on pretty short leash.
Yeah. She's my humble factor.
Okay, guys, we've got one more question for you, and then we're going to turn it over to the audience here. So, unfortunately, there's a lot of forecasts that are saying 2020 is setting up to be a pretty wet spring. I mean, it's already pretty darn wet across the country right now. So, as you guys are sitting here, you're talking to a lot of folks here in the room across the country, what advice do you have for these growers as they prepare for another wet spring?
Be patient. You guys, and I'm going to steal a little bit of David's thunder here, you have a tendency to remember last year on the forefront of your mind. A bunch of you took PP, and you're going to say, this ain't going to happen to me again, right? You are going to run as hard as you can, as fast as you can, and as long as you can to put a crop in. You can put lipstick on a pig, but it's still a pig, okay? Do not, if you got to run, plant beans. They're more forgiving. A corn plant, if the minus button hits, that yield loss is irrevocable. You do not get it back. Plant beans. Enjoy, they're more forgiving. Plant beans and be patient on the corn side, okay? That's the best advice I can give you. Because once that minus button's hit, you're not getting it back. And everybody wants to plant 95 million acres of corn this year and have increased sales. And I know AgriGold's chomping at the bit. We're going to sell some corn this year, right? We're going to make up for all them extra sales we didn't get to sell last year. Blah, 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 right? Plant beans first. Be patient on the corn side, okay? David?
Well, yeah, just like what Randy said, I'm reading some farm publications, and, it just scares me because I read one and two articles. One article said where the grower's like, well, I planted some corn on April whatever date, and then I had to wait till June, and it was 60-some bushel difference. So the moral of his story was, as soon as the conditions are dry enough and I can get in the field, irregardless of what temperatures are, I'm going to plant. And then the next article, the grower was saying, well, I have some of these technologies where I can plant faster. And, typically he said he planted like 4.5, 5 mile an hour, and he planted some at 7, 8 mile an hour. And he said he got more acres done in a day. And it didn't seem like he had as much penalty with it. So I hear the reoccurring theme. So most growers, it's hard to remember past last year. But in 2019, when y'all were going in the planting process, y'all had years of data that told you what hybrids to plant, and you had a plan. Now you had to change your plan because of conditions. So if it gets to where it's wet, maybe trade some of that longer season corn in for a shorter season hybrid. I planted a 76-day hybrid last year because I challenged my son to try to help us figure out how to generate some more revenue. And he said, Dad, we're not so far north. Maybe we can grow 2 crops of corn on the same acre the same year. Hey, is that thinking outside the box in Virginia? So we planted a 76-day hybrid, irrigated, went 270 bushel. Planted another hybrid, and it didn't do as well because some of us didn't think as far. Didn't realize volunteer corn was going to be as bad as it was. So, consider changing hybrids, but then the other idea or advice I would give, I don't know what insurance y'all have, but I would, if I experienced that preventive planting, I'd max out my insurance. If this is truly a concern of mine, we buy up, we pay for high levels of coverage anyhow, but I would, if you have a really good APH, I'd be buying up insurance.
David, they want to save their way to prosperity.
You can't, and you can spend yourself broke too.
I get it.
But you got to cover your costs. And like Randy said, that minus button is just checking. So I've seen the penalty too great by planting at the wrong conditions. I don't know how many of y'all will start planting corn and stop just because the temperatures aren't right. I imagine most of y'all, once the soil's right, you're just going to keep going. We will start and we will stop planting corn now because of the forecast. Now, what really aggravates me is when the weatherman is wrong.
Well, you're a climatologist, according to that picture I have seen. When y'all walk around a trade show, just look for David's picture. He's like this, and it says climatologist, analyst, and world record holder. So yeah. You don't have to depend on the weatherman, right?
Yeah, that's right. And everything's free too. So, yeah. But that would be my advice. Just because of last year, I know they're starting off wet, just be patient. And then, hey, buy insurance.
So you know what everybody's thinking. That 616 divided by 2 was 2 crops last year.
Yeah, no. No, it wasn't. That was 1 crop.
I messed with David real hard because I did some double cropping too. And I said, it don't say anything in the NCGA rules. I said, it says 1.25 acres. Well, if I harvest that 1.25 acres twice in the same season, I know there's a new rule coming now, right? And I said, but there's nothing that says that. And I actually would have spanked your tail with my second crop if I could have added it to it. I should have done that and said, well, I just went by the rules.
Yeah, I wish you had it.
We're ganging up on you now, David.
Yep, that's all right.
So guys, there's a first time for everything. We are in sync. In sync. All right, so we've got 25 minutes left, and I think we're going to open it up to the crowd. Audience participation now. If you've got some questions, we got Dustin Bowling over here to the right. We got John Breen right here. Raise your hand. We'll bring the microphone to you.
Or if there's one close, I'll repeat the question.
Here you go,
One
Dustin.
right here.
Regarding maturity for corn and beans, on your corn, are you pushing the maturity? And on the beans, are you pushing the maturity there for your location?
In reference to corn, their wheelhouse is like that 111 to 114 day. I have had great success with some 120-day hybrids. It seems like trying to match the hybrid when we're going to get that heat. It's just a window. Now, I'm in risk management. A lot of those fields may have some 111-day, and I may have some 118-day hybrid in that same field. So we're just trying to, we don't know what the temperatures are going to be long term. So I want my pollination period to be relatively cool. And then too, about the sunlight. But the 111 to 114 day is my wheelhouse.
For me, I mean, we can plant tropical corn. We can plant that 120-day corn. It's not a problem. My highest yielders has been in that 110 to 112 range for the last several years. I don't know if it's the heat. I don't know if it's the lodging risk because of tropical storms and hurricanes late. I'm not sure why the shorter season, but I don't care. But now we're really interested on some marginal ground that we have. Let's take advantage of being further south. I've challenged several seed companies to give me options to plant a 95 to 105 day, and let's plant that, and then behind it, let's plant another 95 to 100 day. And if I can make 250 and 150 and average 400 on every acre on marginal ground, that math works. So we're looking at doing that. I mean, we'll have, between the harvest time in between the two planting of crops, I mean, we'll have close to 6,000 GDUs between March and our typical average frost date. So there's no reason we couldn't get two crops in there. So we're thinking about it as an ROI, not contest, right? We're thinking about making money. And on marginal ground to make 250 underwater and come back and double crop it. I know this is Greek, you guys, like I'm struggling to make it to black layer on one, but it is an advantage for me. So we're playing around with different relative maturities. As far as beans are concerned, if I'm planting early, I obviously want the longest, indeterminate I can find. So that 4.7 to a 5.1 is where we've had some success.
Okay, next question.
In your efforts to increase your yield for the contest, have you transferred that knowledge over to your whole farm average, and how has it improved your whole farm averages?
Absolutely. That's a place that we can lower our risk, learn from, and as it proves itself for 2 to 3 years, 100%. Why wouldn't we put it on as many acres as we could? The problem is, I feel like most farmers is that they feel like they want to grow. They want to plant more acres. They want to plant more acres. They want to pick up some more acres, et cetera, et cetera. You take the Walmart approach, let's make a little bit of money on a lot of acres and we'll be good. I'd rather see you back off on some of your acres and do a better job and reduce your overall risk there. And it's the same concept. We're learning from small acres and we're applying it to all the acres on the farm, the things that we can get done. I've said it numerous times with our next level meetings is that the difference between a good farmer and a great farmer is what? Timing, attention to detail, and a farmer's level of acceptance. And those things, in my opinion, we don't deviate away from that. We don't want to farm the planet. We want to farm enough acres to pay the bills, but do it right. Do it right. This is not, I farm 6,000 acres. Okay. I farm 3,000 to make as much as you do. That makes sense. That to me is smarter, not farming more acres.
Yeah, and I'm glad you asked that question because a lot of folks think we just pour a lot of money in a contest field and just shoot for the moon. But, my contest fields, ROI proven too.
Well, you get all that free too.
I know. I mean, it is easy to ROI when it's free.
It drives me nuts. We say this in jest, but I see this when the 616 was announced. The keyboard commandos get on the internet, the ag talks, etc., and they start saying, well, if I got everything for free, I could do it too. Or if I had an agronomist at my disposal, I could do it too. Or if I had water. That's not really impressive. He had irrigation. Who's got irrigation in here? Does that the end all? Does that just make you make triple the bushels or double what the national average is? It don't work that way. And it drives me crazy. Or you got the one fellow that'll say, well, that's great. Now we'll sell corn for 75 cents. Now that he's making it 600 bushels. Drives me crazy. Do you want me to say the rest of it?
Yeah, because I just smile when you say that.
So I'll listen to this and I'll see it. Instead of them saying and embrace, you know what? This guy has an opportunity. Maybe I could learn from. Maybe he is doing something. Maybe he's not cheating. Because you hear that one too, right?
Yeah, right.
Maybe there's something he's doing that I could learn from. Instead of embracing it and taking an optimistic approach that maybe there's something out there that I could be a better student of the crop and learn from, they want to be negative Nancy's, right? Keyboard commandos, as I call them. And they poke the bear, and the bear says, nah, as long as you grow corn, you'll bring the national average right back down, and we'll sell $5 corn again.
That's what I like. Yeah. Yeah. But to answer your question, there are a lot of management practices that we have changed on the farm to where our APHs have been going up more so than some of or a lot of our neighbors. I drive by a lot of farm ground that's got better soil than I do, and I see what their yields are compared to theirs. I look at the plant health, from fungicides to fertility programs, and I'm focused on making money. Anybody want to just take a guess? Kind of like auction. How much, take land rent out of the equation. How much do you think it took to raise 600 plus bushel corn per acre? Anybody got a number? 1,200? 15? $1,472, y'all. Think about that. $1,472 less rent, because y'all's rent's different than mine. Mine's different than Dowdy's.
I hope your landlord's not listening.
I don't know. The biggest, that is a struggle. Do you not think that landlords don't read the articles in the magazines too? But
his cost per bushel was $2.39. I just did the math. $2.39. He spent some money. You can't save your way to prosperity, but you can spend your way broke. He obviously was spending some money on some things that paid. Now I'm about $275 to $280. He's got something figured out. Some of that
free product.
Some of that free product's driving his down.
No, not really.
But the bottom line is, everybody in here could have sold corn above $238. Okay? Now you got to understand what pays. And to do that, you have to have data. And that's part of what I know David is doing. He understands where yield is captured and where it's lost.
Next one.
Yeah, you talk about getting plants out of the ground as even as you can, like in 24 hours of emergence there. What's the single thing that you think that helps yield with getting it out of the ground so evenly? Is it hydraulic downforce or some type of row cleaner or press wheels or closing wheels, or what can you add to that?
All the above.
So the hydraulic downforce versus pneumatic downforce is probably a key factor in getting...
No, I would disagree with that. One is more than the other. You have to know what your planter capabilities are. Y'all, Francis Childs had spring planters, and what was he doing? Late Francis Child from Manchester, Iowa. First one to break over 400 bushel corn. He paid attention to the details. He would set a can of pop or a Coke can on his hopper when he started planting corn. If it bounced off, he knew he was going too fast.
But you can't plant 9 miles an hour and do that.
He knew his limitations there.
There you go.
And he was paying to all those details. He didn't start planting early in the morning. He waited till things were right. So, like Randy said, all the above. There's a lot of things that go into even emergence. And, there's not one thing. You just got to pay attention to your soil. You got to pay attention to your genetics that you have from your seed supplier. And you got to take responsibility for a lot of those things with your planter.
The guy I looked at walking all the fields I did with the next level growers this year had a 3600 planter with springs. 3600, Drew? A 3600 planter with springs. And he had the best emergence of anybody out there. So he operated within the confines of what he had to deal with, what he had to work with. So you have to control this right thumb. That's your number one problem, especially in beans. You can't control this right thumb. And when you get through with corn, now you're going to go plant beans for a lot of you, and you're trying to do what? Let's get done. And y'all bump it up another gear. That's a mistake, and you're in control of that, right? It's not a race to get finished. It's a race to get it done correctly. And the bigger you are, that timing, attention to detail, and your level of acceptance goes down, right? So you either got to have more capacity, or you got to back off and stay within the confines of doing it right. Okay?
And then if you buy the latest and greatest technologies, that doesn't give you a free get out of jail card either.
Nope.
Because, when we talked about the planter variability study, the example Randy gave, the guy had a brand new planter. It had all the bells and whistles on it, and he had 120 some bushel swing from one row to another. That's huge.
Went back to the operator at that point, right?
Yeah.
Went back to the operator. Just because it was new and had all the bells and whistles didn't mean that it was the end all. Still got to be used correctly. So we just had a planter clinic in Phoenix. Had over 1,000 guests there, and we had Precision Planting and Missy Bauer and me and David and Soil Warrior and John Deere. Everybody's there, and we're all learning from these people, because what you guys have to understand, a doctor, a physician that you go see, goes back for recurring training every 3 years. A doctor. Every 3 years. Do you think we should be exempt from that as farmers? So you have to be that student of that crop, and you have to keep learning. You have to keep pushing yourself. What are my limiting factors? What is that barrel? It's not just nutrients. What's the limiting factor on my farm? And we teach 9 things that it takes. We could spend 4 hours talking about it, okay? But you can do it with less technology. You just have to understand where, those limiting factors are.
Okay, we've got one here in the back. What's your thoughts and comparisons of tissue test to sap test?
Tissue test is something that's been around, and there's a lot of data, and we can do it. The sap test availability, as I understand it, I think they have to be refrigerated, and they're sent overseas. How practical is that? And how quick can you get the results? Maybe there's a better mousetrap, but I don't know it today. So we focus around tissue samples.
Yeah, I would agree. I just have a archive of data with tissue samples. I even for 1 year took different leaves, like the whole plant, to see if I could use one leaf as an indicator of what's getting ready to happen. And I've experimented with the sap test. I was in a trial with that, but I just have an archive of information. And I agree, once we can get some better analytical data that could indicate, and we can ground truth it and prove to create some correlations, I'd be all on board. But I just haven't had the success with the sap that I have with the tissue.
Any other questions? Got one right here in the front.
Yep, with the hat.
What's your nitrogen application?
My nitrogen application, the question is, what is my nitrogen application? We run some with the strip till rig. I am roughly, this past year we were about 1 pound per bushel yield goal. But we run some with the strip till rig. Then I'm putting out with my planter roughly 66 pounds of nitrogen. Thanks to Randy, I used to be starter on one side of the row, and not stealing your thunder, Dowdy, but, corn roots grow on both sides of the plant, don't they?
They're supposed to.
Yeah, really circular.
Yeah.
So we put starter on both sides of the row. I'm not a huge fan of putting nitrogen in furrow. It's just, that product's usually more costly. I'm in ROI mode. And then we start side dressing, then we'll start wide dropping, and then we'll fertigate. Because of the Chesapeake Bay, it's forced us to be environmentally good stewards, and rather than dumping all the fertilizer on, because when I was a kid, that's what we did. We'd spray it with our herbicides. We had a tank on the disc. We'd work the ground up, put our fertilizer out, and plant the corn and run a cultivator. We were done. Corn was growing. It was easy back then. So now we're just making applications as the crop is responding and we feel we got yield potential, we'll keep spoon feeding the crop. And now I'm just doing trigger times in the plant growth cycle, not like every week. So that's how our fertility program works, nitrogen-wise.
And for me, I'm multi-source. Poultry litter, most of that is broiler litter. We get it as it's available, and we'll apply different rates based off history and what our soil sample values look like. We do some of the planter, obviously 2x2 on both sides of the row. We're playing around with the Soil Warrior this year. We broadcast some fertilizer. we're going to ban some fertilizer for sure and see. And we're going to plant some 15s and 30-inch rows, and we're going to ban fertilizer underneath each one and see what happens. In addition, we fertigate. So we're partitioning fertilizer over time, many different times throughout the season. And partly that's because simply I want my nitrogen use to efficiency ratio to be as low as possible. And we got 4 to 7 cc's and our organic matter is less than 1%. So I don't have a lot of luxury to put it out in the fall and it be available. So we're using different sources, throughout the year to check those boxes on the nitrogen demand, for sure.
But let's not chase this rabbit down the hole. It's not just nitrogen, y'all.
Yep.
It's a system. So.
Okay, we got one in the back. Sir, we'll get you in just a minute.
Randy, 4 years ago you spoke in Martinsburg, West Virginia, and you said when you opened that bag of seed corn, there was a 600 bushel potential.
I missed it.
Have you got a new number?
Well, I think we got to talk.
What's my new goal now?
Shut up. It depends on whose bag of seed you're opening. But all jokes aside, I honestly don't know that answer. I know we've seen, and yield monitor data is relative, right? So, 600 bushel obviously has been done. And I can assure you from somebody that's made 553 that we had some 480s and we had some much higher than that to get to that 553. David, I can assure you it's the same way. He don't average 616 from one end of the field to the other. So it's greater than what we know. So the part that I struggle with is that it's not so much the potential is how much we're losing versus the potential. There's a lot of extra yield out there that a lot of NCGA guys are proving, and there's a lot of people in this room that's made some high yields. Now figure out a way to do that across the whole farm, and now we've done something, right? So I know it's higher than 616, right? So, David?
Yeah, when you get in the combine, and everybody's got one of these and they want to send a picture to their buddy, so they'll take the joystick and jerk it a little bit and take a quick picture. And, I think I get pictures from Dowdy like that on occasion. But
they're 3 minutes long.
That's the problem. Him being a month ahead of me, and I'm giving a talk somewhere, and he sends me a video, and I'm seeing the monitor.
You were actually in the field in Iowa speaking to some next level growers and walking the fields, and I said, I'm about to screw with David.
Oh, yeah. And he did. So
he wants to throw his phone down. He told me one day he threw it in the Chesapeake or the St. James River.
Yeah, James River. But as you're shelling corn, everybody, you need to set a realistic yield goal for you. 10 years ago, I never thought we'd have been shooting for 400 or 500 bushel of corn. But as you're harvesting your corn without changing anything with your joystick, and you'll see your monitor spike up, drop back down. But when you see it get to a level, let's say you're picking 275 bushel corn, and then you see it get into that 300 to 330 range and stay there for a while, now it's obtainable in your environment, under your management. You need to know what you did in that spot. And then you try to duplicate that. So based on your rotation, it probably
So
won't.
stop the combine and get out and look. Drop a pin. Come back. Pull a soil sample.
Yep.
Look at the plant health. Look at the emergence. Figure out what's happening here. Because you just did it in your field. Now see what's different.
So in 2017, when we were picking corn, we're seeing 600 bushels, 620. And I'm like, cool, maybe it is obtainable. Just didn't ever think it happened to us so soon. Well, this past year, I'm sure somebody's saying, well, what did your monitor show? Well, we were seeing 660s and 670s stay there for a little while. Now, it's going to take a whole lot for that to happen. How often I am a climatologist, so I should know when it's going to happen. But it just takes a lot of things to go right. What the genetic potential of the bag is, I remembered years ago I was doing some research, and there was a Professor Tolinar from Guelph University said the genetic potential by 20, 30, or 40, or whatever, is going to be 1,311 bushels. I didn't think we were there. We're not there yet. But we're in this 7, 8, 900 bushel range. I know Pioneer did a plot one year in Chile where they actually had all the seeds at the exact same stage. And if one kernel was not, or that seedling wasn't, they transplanted corn there, and they were able to see some 700 bushel there. So we know there's some potential there. It was a small plot, but it's just that, the seed companies, they've done they're our biggest supporter, and they're giving us a foundation to have that genetic potential. So all we got to do is stop the minus button, like Randy keeps referring to.
Folks, we got 5 minutes left. I think 2 questions. We got one here in the front and then right back here.
Yes, you talked about the test weight on corn, the 65 test weight. Could you address the test weight on your soybean test weights? I know you said you had some seed counts at 1,900.
Where's he at?
Right here. Could you speak to your soybean test weights? Are they 60? Anyway, I'm just curious what you're doing on your soybean test weights.
Well, that's the problem. For us, we'll put them in the bin. I think they got the numbers backwards when they did this a long time ago. We should be selling corn at 60-pound test weight and beans at 56-pound test weight. It's not uncommon for us to see 59 to 60-pound test weight. I don't think we're increasing the test weight, significantly high. We have seen some 60 and 61, but by and large, they're 59. The seed per pound, though, it's a numbers game, right? So the seed per pound is where it's at. I've had a lot of people ask me, well, is the protein levels up higher in that? Well, we don't get paid for those premiums, so I hadn't been checking. Maybe that's the future, kind of like they do on wheat, right? So, I think increasing the seed size is more important than the test weight. On the corn side, test weight's where it's at, right? But I don't know how to get beans to make 64, 65 pounds. I don't know how to do that. I'm listening if you know. I don't know how to do that.
Okay, we got one more question here.
Randy and David, other than sunlight, you said that's the limiting factor that you can't control. What 3 or 4 factors are both of you looking at trying to tweak this year to increase your yields?
Well, number one, we're going to play around with strip till. Number 2, we got to get that simultaneous emergence. That's where we're going to push all fields once we get that simultaneous emergence. That box has to be checked. There's no product that's going to take and cure the problem with the planter, right? Definitely micronutrients. We're playing around with a lot of different micronutrient foliar blends. We're playing around a lot with Brandt products, to be frank. We try everybody's, but our litmus test is this. How long does it take to get in the plant from the time we apply it? Does it move the needle once it gets in the plant? Do we see increases in the tissue sample values? And then how long does it last? That's our parameters of what we look for in all products, and they are not created equal. Do your own test. I don't have to tell you anything. And so we're paying attention a lot to that. And then one exciting thing this year that we got to play around with, I was this close to crop destruct. We had Revitec on those beans that made 190. They brought that new product line out. It had not been EPA registered. We had X amount of product we could play with, but it was understood that it was going to be crop destruct. 2 weeks before we harvested, EPA registered it and got approval. I was this close to crop destruct on 190, that close. But there is some exciting technology there. Me and David got to go to Germany and actually see where a lot of these products are made, the molecules, and get to talk to the people that developed it. And I can assure you, that's the product you may want to pay attention to. They've done a lot of Revex trials and Veltima trials. You may want to be looking at it to see from a plant health perspective and being preventative and curative on the function. It's a different mode of action, and it will help you. The trials show it. So we saw big differences on our farm.
My biggest fear is now that Randy is going to be playing with a strip till rig. So that was my one silver bullet that I thought that I had an advantage over him on. So strip till, I know y'all are tired of hearing me talk about even emergence, but get your planter right. Pay attention to those details. I'm sure there are YouTubes and stuff. You can check Precision or Missy Bow or something, but get that planter right. And then nutritionally balanced. I do not want my crop to have a bad day, whether it's production corn or irrigated corn. We don't want it to have a bad day. We're focused on that component of it. And, I don't want to sound like a copycat, but the plant health, I stated that earlier. Start early and finish the crop. Most people don't. They'll do 3 quarters. There's 4 quarters in a basketball game or whatever. So most growers do a really good job on the first 3, and they let the last one just slide. So finish the crop, y'all.
I got one more thing before we're done. I want to say, number one, everybody remembers Stephen Albert, right? I don't know what happened. Everybody remembers Stephen Albrock? Great guy. I don't know if Miss Cheryl's here or their family. But we lost him, and there's a lot of people that I'm aware of today that's struggling, physical ailments, etc. But I also hear on Facebook, read on Facebook, that every day or every week, grain bin accidents, people getting killed in grain bins, etc. Life is fragile. There are people that depend on you, that love you. Be careful. We take a lot of unnecessary chances. And the main thing we need to be ready is that when our time does come, that we can look at him and him say, "Well done, my child." So make sure you're right. Be careful. And keep some of the people, we've got some dear friends that we know of that's struggling with cancer now, whisper a prayer. Keep the Albrock family in your prayers. They've been through a lot. David, would you mind closing the day in prayer?
I would gladly do that. If we could just bow our heads. Dear Heavenly Father, just ever so grateful for the opportunity through AgriGold to just present with these growers so that we could all become better stewards of the resources you've given us. You've challenged us in 2019, dear Lord, and we know we're going to plant your seeds and just nurture them and just give us their health, our safety, particularly as we're away from our family and coworkers, so that we could return home safely, and just bless us in 2020. In Jesus Christ's name, amen. Thank you all very much.